It's Monday, and that so happens to be the day that I like to talk about monsters. Hello, and welcome to Monster Mondays. I am Geoff Arbuckle, co-host of the podcast Film Seizure, that you can catch each Wednesday morning at filmseizure.com or at a number of podcast providers online. Forget about ruining a picnic. The monsters in this week's movie will ruin an entire food district. We're right back in the Burt I. Gordon H.G. Wells wheelhouse yet again with 1977's Empire of the Ants. Gordon had to be a huge fan of Wells. I mean, he twice took elements of the H.G. Wells book The Food of the Gods to make movies. One was just covered a few weeks ago, named The Food of the Gods, and the other was the 1960s teenager romp Village of the Giants. Then came Empire of the Ants. So yeah, I would have to assume that he liked what H.G. Wells brought to the table. Now, I spoke quite a bit about Gordon back a few weeks ago when I covered The Food of the Gods, but with Empire of the Ants, he cast a fairly significant lead star for his movie, Joan Collins. Collins started acting in stage productions at an early age. By her teenage years, Collins was making her way into films. And the big break came in 1952's I Believe in You, which gave her the press nickname of quote-unquote Britain's Bad Girl. And it's kind of funny because I think that kind of remained a title that would follow her for a few decades after that. She was always this kind of, I don't know, the way I always kind of saw her or thought of her was that she was always this posh ball buster. Hell, she appeared in a movie based on her sister Jackie Collins' novel called The Bitch. The poster for this movie features her in a bustier and lingerie with a leather hat. Image on the poster that makes her look like Britain's Bad Girl. The title is the reputation that I feel kind of followed her as a primetime soap opera actress in the series Dynasty. Now, frankly, what I know her best is as a hugely important character in Star Trek. Joan Collins was Edith Keeler in one of the greatest episodes of any Star Trek series ever, The City on the Edge of Forever. In that story, a crazed Dr. McCoy accidentally hopped up on a drug, it's a long story, travels back through time through a portal on a planet named the Guardian of Forever. Again, long story. But after doing so, something that McCoy did while he traveled in time changes history and forces Captain Kirk and Mr. Spock to follow him back to wherever he went. Now, back in time, they arrive in Depression-era New York City. They meet a soup kitchen operator, Keeler, who Kirk almost instantly falls in love with. Spock discovers what the change made was, and that is Edith Keeler was supposed to die in an accident. McCoy saved her life, and by doing so, Keeler's influence as a pacifist meant that the United States did not join World War II and Hitler's Germany took over the world. In doing so, it erased the future that gave birth to the Federation and what basically Star Trek is. Ultimately, Kirk has to be the one who stops McCoy from saving Keeler, who dies in a traffic accident, and that leaves Kirk heartbroken. So yeah, I mean, Joan Collins is a pretty important part of Star Trek history. Now, turning back to Empire of the Ants, this movie is not really fondly remembered. Just take my word for it. Don't go over to Rotten Tomatoes to see what its score is. It was a bit of a nightmare to shoot. Now, this was filmed in Florida, but like in the swamps of the Everglades. So it took like 30 minutes each way by speedboat to get to the shooting location from where a chunk of this movie was filmed and to and from where they were being housed. You got to go to the bathroom, it's going to be an hour. This was a summer 1977 release. That means that it was filmed in the autumn of 1976. Now, while it is Florida, the temps would still dip and the water was extremely cold. One of the actresses, Pamela Susan Shoop, had to scream, but with the temps so bad, it ultimately caused her jaw to dislocate, and she had to go to the hospital. Actor Robert Pine, father of Chris Pine, who played Captain Kirk in the J.J. Abrams Star Trek trilogy, was part of a scene where people fell out of a boat into the swamp. Now, in the swamp in Florida, guess what was waiting for the actors in the water? gators. Apparently, Bird-Eye Gordon promised that there would be a cage dropped into the water to protect the actors. For whatever reason, that cage never arrived, so Pine was in the water with actual alligators. It's kind of wild, but you can tell that there was maybe a little bit of fast and loose behind-the-scenes stuff going on here. But what is going on in Empire of the Ants, and what are the 3 things I like about it? Well, let's find out. The movie opens with a narrator showing us some ants and warning us that we need to treat them with respect, for they may be the next dominant creature on the planet. We're told about their intelligence, their communication system, and how they secrete pheromones that cause an obligatory response. These pheromones bend the mind of those receiving them and force them to obey. And the narration ends with us being told not to worry too much about all that stuff, because that's clearly ant business. Then, as the credits play, we see folks on a boat dumping radioactive barrels into the sea, one after another. The barrels fall into the sea off this boat, and once they're done, they carry on with their business, having finished an honest day's work. But SpaghettiOs, one of those barrels has washed ashore. We then meet Marilyn Fraser, who's a land developer, and that's who Joan Collins plays. And she's taking a bunch of prospect buyers to a part of Florida where she hopes to sell land. The captain of the boat taking people there is Dan Stokely, played by Robert Lansing. And she's kind of a jerk to Captain Dan, saying that she doesn't want him to make anyone seasick, as sick customers won't buy things. And it should be said that her land is pretty crappy, but she tries to dress it up as the potential for beachfront property. But it's on this beach where her land is being developed that the barrel came ashore. And it's also got a leak, and it's oozing this silver stuff that ants are crawling around in. Now, there are various folks here looking over the land. We have Joe, who is maybe not someone who would be able to afford the land at this beach, but he's kind of there just checking stuff out anyway. There's Larry, who's played by Robert Pine. His wife, Christine, played by Brooke Palance, who's Jack Palance's daughter. Those two, Christine and Larry, have marital problems, and considering Larry comes on and attempts to actually rape Corrine, who's played by Pamela Shoop, that I mentioned earlier. There's an older couple who are just there to enjoy free stuff in their retirement. There's another couple who complains about the cheapness of the booze and always looking for a fraud and the whole deal that they're listening to. Then there's a lady who's just seemingly looking for an investment, but is a little nervous about all the sales pitch and so forth. And the radioactive goo seems to work quickly on the ants as they begin to scope out the various people at the party from the shrubs and behind the trees and so forth. Now, while Tom, the guy who complained about the cheap booze, is looking for fault in the land so that he can, I guess, feel superior to Marilyn and go off on her about trying to sell them on a bum deal, he and his wife, Mary, are out just kind of scoping things, and like I said, he's looking for faults. And they're attacked by giant ants. Tom is ripped up pretty good by a couple of the ants. Another ant begins to close in on a screaming Mary, and it cuts away. It's safe to assume that that both of them die in this scene. But soon, as the tour tram gets off the main path to look at some of the places where some extra things are being built for this development deal, a body of one of the development crewmen is found, and Joe and Corrine decide to go and investigate and try to find Mary and Tom, who did not join the tour. Joe and Corrine find the ants, while the rest of the tour group also discover giant ants trying to attack and destroy the boat that they used to get to this portion of the beachfront where they were looking at the land. After an ant gets on the boat to kill a guy that's there, Captain Dan uses some gasoline and blows the boat up and kills the ants that crawled on board. The party on shore build a fire to keep the ants away so that they can get as much sleep as possible. The next day, just as the fire begins to die out, a thunderstorm starts raining down onto the beach. The party begin a 2-mile trek toward a river where Marilyn's crew has a boat that they might be able to use to get away. The old couple start to fall behind, so they decide to go find shelter as the rest of the party run away from the ants. Larry, being a big piece of shit, doesn't save his wife Christine when she trips and hurts her ankle. She's soon swarmed by the ants, and when Marilyn is stuck in some branches, Charlie, one of her employees and kind of a boy toy of hers, helps her get free but is trapped and killed by the ants. The party is a little bit more split up now. The old couple, Harry and Velma, are hiding out in the shed. Christine and Charlie are dead. And the rest of the crew make it to the boat eventually, but in 2 packs, basically. Some of the ants line up along the river as Captain Dan and crew row down the stream. However, the old couple, Harry and Velma, are completely screwed as the little shed they were sheltered in is completely surrounded by ants. The gang on the boat aren't much better off as they eventually run into a dead end that I think is created by the ants. I think it's heavily implied that the ants created that. Dan and Joe are able to fight off the ants just well enough for them to get away. However, going back the other way means more ants, and they attack and capsize the boat. Also, the ant that capsized the boat also kills Charlie, too. So we're now down to a pretty more manageable group. Captain Dan, Marilyn, Captain Dan's friend Margaret, who he's been kind of flirting with, or I should say she was flirting with him while they were on this beach. And then there's Joe and Corinne. There's just the 5 of them remaining. Dan figures out that the ants are basically hurting them. They're doing a pretty darn good job at hurting them and making sure they don't end up someplace the ants don't want them to go. Now, there is some good news. There's a town nearby. A couple of weird-acting old farmers out in the middle of these woods call the sheriff to help get the survivors to town. But bad news, this town has a giant sugar factory that is a favorite eating spot for the ants. In fact, Corinne has some idea that the town is not so great. She tells Marilyn and Margaret that the old lady at the farm told her that no matter what happens, don't let anyone take her to the sugar factory. The survivors get a room at the local motel where the guy running the place is on the phone saying that they are in desperate need for more sugar and to never mind what he's using it for. Dan and Joe plan to rent a car to get everyone out of town, but the cagey car rental clerk won't give them a car until the next day. And what's more, it appears the sheriff is lying about getting some deputies and going back out to check out the ant problem. Joe and Dan are left to hotwire a car to begin driving out of town, but are faced with a roadblock that forces everyone off the road. And when the cops get our survivors out of the wrecked car, Dan punches one of the cops, which allows Joe and Corinne to escape into like this field of, I'm assuming, a sugar cane, while Marilyn, Margaret, and Dan are taken to the sugar factory. What we find at the sugar factory is that all the people from town are brought in on trucks, and this is where the queen ant of these giants basically douses people with her pheromones and places all the people under the control of the ants. The people in and around this town must be brought here each week to get a dose of that sweet, sweet queen ant pheromone, which does make me wonder exactly how long have these ants been playing in the radioactive goo. Because to us, it only seems like it's been a couple of days, but apparently it's been going on for weeks, but whatever. Meanwhile, out in the sugarcane field where Joe and Corinne escaped to, they are eventually herded by ants and captured by the cops and taken inside the factory. And they are brought in just in time to see Marilyn put into the little chamber and get doused with the pheromones. And she's basically instantly changed and made to help the ants. Dan goes in next and uses a flare that he pulled out of the glove compartment of the car they hotwired to fight off the queen. The rest of the swarm of ants begin attacking people in response to the queen being in trouble. When the queen is lit on fire by the flare, it also seemingly starts to break the control that she had over the various people in town. Joe uses a tanker truck full of flammable liquid to blow up the factory and the ants. So, it's time to do that voodoo that I do to talk about the 3 things I like about the movie I featured each week. The first thing that I have to give credit for to Empire of the Ants, and a like too, is how the first few minutes set up each and everything you need to know about what's going to happen. I do like being given all the information so easily and not have to wait or try to connect the dots or what have you. Ants are pretty darn intelligent. There are a lot of different kinds of ants. They herd aphids like we do cows. Some work in perfect unified purpose to do something for themselves that also benefits the ecosystem as a whole. Sure, they have pheromones that induce obedience, but, as we're told, that's basically ant shit. We don't have to worry about it. Don't worry about it. But hey, take a look. Some guys are dumping radioactive crap into the ocean. I don't know about you, but that seems bad. It's a good thing ants don't live in the ocean. Oh, wait, never mind. One of those barrels washed up on shore, and I can do the math here. Ants plus radioactive crap plus that ant shit with their pheromones, well, that's going to equal Empire of the Ants. Thank God I don't have to think too much about any of this. Now, before the credits are done, I already know how we're getting the big giant ants and have big giant problems. This isn't phase 4. We don't need to make any of this more difficult than it needs to be to eventually get Joan Collins in front of a giant ant. That may sound like I'm kind of taking the piss at the movie, but I mean it. This has a very simple setup. Ants do stuff. We don't respect the earth. Ants will do something about us. Perfect. Great. And granted, it does spend a lot of time talking about characters. I'm going to talk about that here in just a moment. But we get that set up real quick, and it's nice and easy going at that point. My second like is that this movie, while kind of oddly composed, it does decide to keep the ants at a somewhat minimum. Sure, the ants pop up a lot over the course of the 70 or so minutes of the movie that they are a major presence in. And I'll talk a little bit more about the ants here in just a moment. But what this like is all about is what I just kind of mentioned for, is the fact that for better or worse, you are thrown a lot of characters for you to kind of cheer against. Or at the very least, that they become acceptable losses because they just kind of suck as people or as characters. Very easily the biggest piece of shit in this whole movie is Robert Pine's Larry. When we meet him, he's hitting on Pamela Shoop's Corinne right in front of his wife. Then he literally attempts to rape Corinne about 100 feet away from the party that kicks off this whole sales pitch. Then, when his wife falls down, he decides to save himself without even trying to help her. So he's a massive turd. I wish he got it worse than he did. I mean, he just kind of gets pulled into the water and jabbed at a little bit, and then he drowns. The old couple who decide to break off and hide in the shed, well, they're kind of stupid for doing that. And the old man even earlier had said that he wasn't going to go look for that first missing couple because, well, he's old. He can't do it. Not really a major loss in this movie. They actually oftentimes seemingly are using their ages as a crutch. So they kind of get what's coming to them by not wanting to help out the younger characters. We actually never see the older couple get killed, but I'm sure they did. The one guy, Tom, who sneaks off to find the sham, what the sham is of this place, he seems like a pain in the ass. I'm glad he got the ant treatment. The interesting character that you do start to kind of like is actually Marilyn. Joan Collins starts off as kind of shady and bitchy, and there are times in which she begins to shit on Captain Dan despite having no idea how to survive a wilderness and so forth. Yet, by the end, when they shuffle her into the chamber to get the pheromones from the queen, you don't want her to be turned quote-unquote bad. Then, in the fog of everything going on with the queen getting attacked and so forth, I mean, as the sheriff shakes off the control of the queen, he shoots the ant, which causes the queen to attack and kill Marilyn. I mean, it's kind of an unfortunate end. My point is that in this movie, while they spend a lot of time setting up these characters instead of cutting to the chase with the ant monsters, you are kind of rewarded seeing these people get attacked by ants. They do a very good job very quickly of making sure you understand a lot of these people suck. They range from being kind of useless to being jerks all the way up to being a downright turd. It kind of falls into line that when you see a monster movie or a horror movie, you know people are going to die, so you want to kind of make sure that the right ones do. And I do generally feel satisfied here with this movie. Lastly, let's talk about those ants, shall we? Now, while the effect of seeing the ants is done similarly to the giant animals in The Food of the Gods, where there's a close-up of the big animal that is merged into a shot of the actors reacting to it, and yes, there are times it looks awful in this movie, and sure, it cannot be easy to film ants. Most of the time it seems like we're just watching a glob of ants wrestling with each other than actually doing anything. But there are other times that they don't seem to be interacting all that well with whatever it seems like they should be interacting with. That stuff isn't why I'm counting this as a like in my book. What I really do like in this are the puppets or the prosthetics or whatever they are. I mean, they do kind of actually look like real giant ants. If these were mammals, it would look like someone in a bear costume or a stuffed animal or whatever. With ants and their exoskeletons, these can look way better. I have no doubt that they were rubber or plastic ant monsters on a metal stick that gets jabbed at the actors, and maybe there's a trigger that the crewmen had to make their pincers move or whatever, but that's fine. They look good. I like the way they look. I would say that there are some curious differences in what the superimposed ants are in size as the puppet ones attacking the people on screen, but the puppets do look good, and it's really that kind of classic filmmaking at the end of this era of giant monsters in movies. And I found myself actually most engaged while watching this movie when I'm watching the actors fight off these puppets. So that wraps up this week's Monster Mondays. You can catch new episodes of Monster Mondays each Monday at FilmSeizure.com. Don't forget to follow Film Seizure at Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and subscribe to Film Seizure to get both the Film Seizure Podcast and Monster Mondays at your favorite podcast providers, as well as YouTube. You can also check out my website, bmovieenema.com, to read new articles every Friday morning. Next time, we go back to the Showa era of Godzilla and check out a battle between the Big G and another creature like ants with an exoskeleton when Godzilla takes on Ebirah, horror of the deep. Until next week, stay spooky.